Right, so we've talked about linear regression for a couple of days, and today we are going to talk about quadratic regression. So two learning goals: we want to be able to use our graphing calculator to make an actual scatter plot, and we want to be able to use it to find quadratic regression. So with linear regression, we didn't really look at the scatter plot, we just found the regression equation. But now we're going to actually be looking at the picture because we are not going to be doing quadratic regression by hand, only on the calculator. So our example here, we have data and it is representing the height of a model rocket at various times during its flight after its rocket motor has burned out. So T represents time in seconds, H represents the height of the rocket. So very important to know what our variables stand for. So as we start these quadratic regression problems, first we want to go into our y equals screen. Because we're going to be graphing this and actually looking at the picture, we need to clear out any equations that are in there that we don't need. So go to your y equals screen, clear out anything that's in there that you no longer need. And if there is something in there that you do need, remember that you can have it not graph that equation by pressing enter over top of the equal sign. That will turn it off, at least for graphing, yet still keep the equation in there if you need it. All right, so after you've done that, then you're going to clear your lists. So stat, so here we should probably write this in. Clear your lists, which we did yesterday. So you press stat, and then it's choice 4, which says clear list, and then you can tell it which lists to clear, and it'll say done when it's cleared them. So once your lists are clear, then you can go to stat and go to edit. So we are going to enter this data. Remember, T is time in seconds and H is height in feet. So I'm going to put my T values in my list 1. So those are pretty easy to remember, just 1 through 7. Then I press my right arrow so that I can get into my list 2 to enter the heights. Again, it may be helpful to cross them off as you go to make sure that you are not double entering a value or anything like that. All right, so once you've got your data entered, very similar to what we did with linear regression as far as where it is in the calculator, we're going to press the stat key. Again, we'll scroll over. Remember that the calc menu, you scroll to the right to get calc. And it's right below the linear regression. So it's option number 5, and it should say quad reg. So you can just press 5 if you want, or you can use your arrow to scroll down. Again, I talked about this yesterday because yesterday's lesson I just had the one screen. Here are the 2 different choices of what it's going to look like. So depending on your calculator model, you're going to have quadratic regression just in a blank screen, or you're going to have something that looks like this. Now, what we are going to want to do, this part previously we only did with the linear regression, we only did the L1 and the L2. But here, because we want to actually graph the quadratic regression equation, we need to add this. So in the newer calculators, it's easier because it actually tells you what it is. So it says X list L1, Y list L2, store regression equation in Y1. But with the older models, you just have to tell it in order. This is what the X list is. This is what the Y list is. And this is where I want you to store the regression equation. All right, so again, you can change this. If you used L2 and L3, obviously you would adjust accordingly. If you've already got something that you want to keep in your Y1, then certainly you can make it Y2. Now, we should already know how to type L1 and L2 because we did that with linear regression. So those ones, remember, it's just the second key and then whichever number it is. So to get L1, you pressed second 1. Comma key is above the 7 key. L2, you press 7, 2. Now, to get the Y1 in there, that's new. So this right here, you need to pay attention to those keystrokes. So to get that, you have to press, it says like vars. It's next to the clear button, kind of below your arrows. So you press the vars. So once you're in either your store regression equation is where we're going to type it if you have the newer calculator. If you have the older one, it'd be after your second comma. But you press the vars, then you scroll right to get Y vars. It stands for variables, so Y variables. Then you're going to choose choice 1 because we want it to be function notation. And then you choose whichever one you want. So in this case, if you're using Y1, then you choose 1. If you want to put it in Y2, you would choose 2, so on and so forth. All right, and so once you have it looking exactly like this screen or this screen, depending on your calculator model, then if you have this screen, you're just going to press enter. If yours looks like this, the newer models, then you need to scroll down to calculate and then press enter. Now, once you do that, you should see a screen that is somewhat similar to this below. And you may or may not have something below it that says r squared. If you do, that's fine. If you don't, that's fine as well. We'll talk about that in a later lesson. But the variables a, b, and c are the coefficients for the quadratic. So what this is doing is this is showing you standard form of a quadratic equation, which we should know, and it's telling you, hey, a is this number, b is this number, and c is this number. So it's giving you your equation. So now that we know the equation, and it should nicely be stored in your y equals screen, you can check it if you want. And it looks super long because it stores the whole thing. The reason why you need to do this and not type it in yourself is because we should know by now that rounding makes a difference. So what it does is it pastes this entire thing. It doesn't round it to the nearest tenth or hundredth, which makes a difference for when we are calculating and graphing. So now what we're going to do to actually plot this is we're going to press the stat plot key, which is, I've notated here, it's you press the second button and then your y equals. So we want to choose plot 1 and we want to turn it on. We want our screen to look like this. We've talked about this before, so we're going to use this first type. We want our x list to match where we put our x values, our y list to match where we put our y values. So make sure that works. Then we need to press to choose an appropriate window, because in a standard window, we're not going to get our picture at all because these y values are much above 10. So an appropriate window here on the x's, we can probably go from 0 to 10 because I don't have any negatives. So all I'm doing is I'm looking at my data. I'm looking at my data here and I'm saying my x's, which are my t's, go from 1 to 7. So I'm just going to go 0 to 10. My h's, which are my y values, my dependent variable, the lowest number that I have is 220 and the highest number that I have is 360. So I need it to go above 360. Because we usually want to be able to look at x-intercepts, I'm not going to start at 0 because I want to be able to see a little below my line. So I'm going to go up to 400. We usually want to count by something that's easy to count by, so I'm going to count by 50s, and because of that, I'm going to make my y minimum negative 50. So my y minimum, I'm making negative 50. My y maximum, I'm going to make 400. And my y scale, I need to change. Remember that the by 50s part, that's the y scale. So by 50s. And then you can press the graph key. And so what it should do is you should now see a lovely graph with all of the different little data points on there. And then you should also see an equation that is running through those data points. And it looks something like that. So it's showing the best fit parabola instead of best fit line and the individual data points. So now that we have that, we can do exactly what we did when we graphed quadratics. We can find answers to certain questions. When did the rocket reach its maximum height? So we know that we can't just look at the table necessarily, because maybe the highest point is after the 360. Maybe at 4.2 seconds, it's at 365. We don't know that for sure. So we need to find it. So we do second trace. Choice 4, because that's maximum. So we've done this a million times. So when we are finding a maximum on the graphing calculator, we have to go left bound of the maximum and right bound of the maximum. And when we have it guess, we find that the, oops, I'm actually doing this incorrectly. I said it incorrectly anyway. I'm finding what was the rocket's maximum height is what I was talking about first, but it's the same thing. Both of these first two questions, you do the same thing. So we're looking at the second trace maximum. The first question asked when it reached its maximum height. So if we look there, its maximum height is the x value, because when is time. So time at the maximum is about 3.94 seconds. So again, it wasn't exactly 4 seconds in the data point. What was the rocket's maximum height? Well, that's the y value, because height is y. So we look, and it's about 364.34 feet. So again, it did, according to our best fit parabola, reach a height above the highest height that's listed in the table. Next, when will the rocket hit the ground? Again, we're visualizing this. If this is the flight of the rocket, it hits the ground when its height becomes 0. So right here is when it hits the ground, at that second y-intercept. So the second y-intercept, we've done this a bunch of times too. That's also in your second trace menu, but it is choice 2 because it's a 0. X-intercepts are zeros. So remember that you have to do the left bound, right bound again. Remember, it's asking for you to press enter where the x values are to the left. So x values to the left, press enter. Then it says right bound, so move it where the x values are to the right of that 0 and press enter. Then it says guess, press enter a third time, and it should say 0 and then give you an answer. So an x value, again, we're saying when did the rocket hit the ground, so time, which is the x value, and that would be at approximately 8.81 seconds. All right. So hopefully you had success and don't find this too difficult. One thing that might be helpful just for the future, when you are trying to find a window here in step 7, Sometimes if you can't get your window to look right, there's a choice in there under your zoom menu. I think it's choice 9, but zoom stat, whenever you have statistics, will automatically find a window that shows you most of it. Now you may have to adjust it some, because if you do zoom stat on this one, it's not going to show the x-axis. So again, it's much better to know how to do it yourself right from the beginning, but zoom stat can help you at least kind of find a starting point if you are having trouble with that. So after you graph, if you're having trouble finding the correct window, you can press zoom stat to help you out. But again, it's not going to give you the exact correct window depending on what questions you want to answer about the equation. All right, that is it for today.